This is Professor Allen from IS 201. We didn't really have time today in class to be able to fully do the example where we looked at some data that was stored in Excel and move it over to Access. So I'd like to go ahead and push that through so you can kind of see the process of bringing this data over. Most of what this video will show will be beyond what you need for understanding data in Access, and certainly the part where I'm building some forms to kind of bring all this data back together. But some of you have expressed interest in kind of seeing that whole process, so I thought I'd put this video together. I'll begin by downloading the data file that we had in class. Now I've made a couple of changes to the macro so that it will automatically remove duplicates before we ever get it to Access, which will streamline things. So this file is a little bit different than the one we had in class. So if you're following along, you'll want to re-download this file. And I think I'll just put this into a new folder called Data in my downloads. And I'll open that file up. It's opening. Looks like I opened on the wrong screen. I'll bring it up here. And we'll enable editing. All right, so this is the data that we looked at today in class. The data are the same. We have information about a book. Here's the title. It's the copyright year. A couple of subjects here, adventure and military science. Both subjects. Has potentially many genre, many subgenre, and many books that are similar to it. This book has one author, could have potentially multiple authors. That person fills the role of author, and that person's name is Jeff Shara. Birth year, nationality, occupation, country, region, all pertaining to the author. So when we see a book that has multiple authors, we will see multiple lines of the book data. So that's kind of a little bit unusual. Let's see if we can just scroll down here. So here's a book where we have an author and an illustrator. Title of the book is Bull Run. All this information about the book is the same and duplicated line per line. But then we have two authors. One's actually the illustrator, and then one is the author. So this information will be different for that. So this guy was born in 1952. We don't have the birth year information for David Frampton, and we have various other information about the author. So what our goal today in this video is to get this information that's stored and maintained in a spreadsheet into a properly formatted structure for Microsoft Access, so to manage this in a relational database management system. And of course, the main benefits to doing that are we'll have better data integrity, we'll have better ability to have multi-user concurrency, and our querying capabilities will be substantially improved as well. Now, the first thing that is a big no-no in relational database management is what we refer to as multi-valued attributes. So here, where we're looking at this particular book, Brave Enemies, has three subjects: identity, wars, and women. These are the subjects that this is listed under. Some of these have multiple genre. So here's one, historical fiction and Western fiction. And so what we need to do is, instead of having one record for that represents this book and has two or three values for the multi-valued attributes, we need to be able to show this with multiple records. So this is a quick example. If we're taking this particular information here, let me just bring this over to a new worksheet. To be able to get this data and store it correctly in a relational model, let's see if I can get rid of this. Refill. And instead of saying we've got one, and maybe we'll go ahead and put some columns in this. Here's the book ID. Title we don't need for this. Year we don't need. It's just this multi-valued attribute that we're looking at. So instead of saying something like subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, and then splitting this out according to that, this is one temptation about how we might be able to deal with this problem. And it does get rid of the multi-valued attribute, but it is not going to be organized in a way that's going to be beneficial to us while working in relational database management system. Okay, so instead of doing this, what our approach will be is we'll want this to show up like this. We'll have one subject, and then we will repeat the book ID 3 times. And then we'll bring these other subjects down. So this is the goal, what we're after. And this functionality isn't built into Microsoft Access or Microsoft Excel to be able to get this change to happen automatically. But fortunately, I've created a macro that will do this for us in all of these multi-valued attributes. But we've got to get the data now broken out for all the 200 books that are on this this way so that we can have the data ready to import into Access. And so I'm going to come over here to Data. I'm going to come to the subject. So I put my cursor anywhere on the subject column. And I'll choose View Macros. And there should be only one macro in this workbook. It's called Expand a Multi-Valued Attribute. I'll run that, and it will create another sheet that has all of that information. It should have the same thing that we did over here on this sheet. So if we could find this particular book number over there, we should see that it has split those 3 values onto 3 different rows. And so here's where that block of data ends up, and we've got these 3: history, United States history, and Western fiction. And if we look just at the one that we played with, we've got history, United States history, and Western fiction, all pertaining to this particular book ID that ends in 92900. And so, and this is 92900, so that is the same one, but it's just that macro did that for all of the books. So we've got 200 books, and if we look at them in terms of their subjects, what we're seeing is 612 different subjects that we have here. So I will go ahead and do that for my other 3 multi-valued attributes. So genre is a multi-valued attribute. I'm going to go ahead and run that macro, which will give me a genre page with all the genre for the different books. Same thing for subgenre, view, macros, run, and the similar books data. View, macros, run. All right, so now I have 4 sheets here in my Excel workbook. One that has the main data, that has all of the data, and then 4 other ones that I've generated just to give prominence to my multi-valued attributes. So they're organized in the way that we need them to be able to bring them into Access. So I'll go ahead and launch Access, and we will import data from this workbook. So I'll make a blank database. It wants to know where do I want to store it. I'm going to store it in the same location that I stored this workbook. So I'll browse to find that. That was in my downloads. I made a folder called data. And I'm just going to call this database, I'll call it book data. And we've made a new database. Now I'm going to be importing data from this book data 2 XLSM file. So I'm going to close that. Access will just be happier if this workbook's closed. So I'll close that workbook, save changes, yes. And now I'm ready to do some importing here. So Access comes up with a table in case you just want to start typing away. I'm going to close that table. And I'm going to go ahead and import some data. So I'll come to external data from Excel. I'll go ahead and browse to that location, which will be my downloads. Looking for the folder called data. And there's my book data XL, or book data 2 XLSM that I'm importing from. It could be a security concern. We don't really know about this. That's okay. It's possible to return the content. All right, you probably didn't get that error. I'm not sure why I got that error message. So I'll go ahead and bring in the book subject data first. These are all the tabs that I have in that workbook. I'll click Next. First row has headings. It's just telling it to take that first row in the Excel file and use those for the table, for the column names of this table. We'll accept the defaults here. Now, getting to primary key, if we let Access choose the primary key, it's going to generate a new column here for primary key, just called ID. And it'll be an auto increment. It'll just automatically put a number in. I don't want that. What I really want is the book ID and the subject together to be the primary key, but unfortunately I can't make that choice during the import here. So I'm just going to set this to no primary key. The table will be book subject. That's a fine table name, so I'll go ahead and finish and close. That will import that book subject data. So here I've got this particular book. Book number ends in 1762, and we can see that that has 4 subjects: frontier life, American states history, Western fiction, and the colonial period, 1600-1775. And so great, we've imported that, but I'm going to go ahead and add that primary key. So I'll take this into Design View, and I'll just click and drag in the left-hand margin here to select both of those rows, click on the primary key, and then close and save. And so now that has set the primary key of those 2 columns. I'm going to quickly go ahead and import the rest of those tabs. So external data from Excel, browse to my workbook. Now I'll bring in the book genre. We've got headings. Do not want a primary key, and finish. There's book genre. I'll take this into Design View, and again apply the primary key to both of those columns. 2 down, 3 to go. External data from Excel. Choose the one I want. Now the subgenre. First row contains no primary key. Finish. There's book genre. I am going to go into Design View, set the primary key, and save. External data from Excel. Choose my Excel file. Now on similar books. First row, no primary key. Similar books. Design View. Primary key. Okay, so those are the 4 that I created, the 4 multi-valued attributes that we expanded into their own individual tables. And now I'm going to import the base data. Same process. It's just the sheet is called data. First row contains names. I'll accept all these defaults. Primary key. But no primary key on this one as well. And finish. All right, so now I've brought in the data that I want to be able to work with in Access. Let me begin by bringing out, now just separating the data for a book from the data for an author. And so to do that, I'm going to create an Access query. So I'll come to the Create tab, Query in Design View. These tools are very nice for working with queries in Design View, but it's beyond what I'm going to have time to teach in class, so we're just going to stick with the structured query language. And looking at this data table, the information I need from a book really isn't very much. It's the book ID, it's the title, and the copyright year. Subject, genre, subgenre, those are all these multi-valued attributes that I had to split out. Author ID, role, and all this author information pertains to the author. So it's really just these first 3 columns, book ID, title, and copyright year, that I'm interested in. So I will say select book ID, title, should be commas, not periods, and copyright year from book. From data. And I will execute that. And so here are information for my books. But if you'll remember, when I look at my data, I come down here to Bull Run, this information about the book on the Bull Run data is duplicated because we've got 2 different authors. So we've got Paul and David here, both authors, and to have room for their author information, we've duplicated these. Now it's the same information for the book, and so it's exactly the same. It's the same ID, same title, same copyright year. So I'm going to tell my query, SQL, that I don't want to select everything. I want to select distinct. This will tell it, hey, remove any duplicates. If I've got 3 rows that are exactly the same, collapse that down to just one. If I've got 12 rows that are the same, throw away 11 of them and keep only one of them. So now instead of 220 records, when I run this, I should get 199, and that's how many books there are in this particular data set. And so that query extracts out the data that I'm interested in. Now, to be able to get this to create a new table, instead of just selecting it, before I get to the from, I'm going to say into, and I'm going to give it a new name. I'm going to call this book. This is going to be my book table. So now when I run that, it should say, hey, you're about to paste 199 rows. That's great. And it's created a table now called book, and it has the results of that query stored in it. And so that's very nice. Again, now that I have just 199 records, this book ID should be unique. I don't think I'll find 2 different records with the same book ID here. So I'll go ahead and make that the primary key, the unique identifier for this particular set of data. I'll take this into design view, make that the primary key. Now, if there are duplicates, this will fail when I try to save it. We say yes, took that okay. So we now know that we don't have any duplicates in that book ID. Otherwise, we couldn't have made it the primary key for this table. We'll do something similar to produce the author table. For that, we'll need the list of all the author, all the columns that pertain to the author. So back at my data, we'll see these are actually the author ID, then the full name, birth year, nationality, and the rest of these. So we'll go ahead and modify our query to say that. So instead of book ID, title, and copyright year, I'm going to bring in the author ID, full name, birth year, nationality, occupation, country, region, and city. So these are the columns that pertain to the author. I'm going to insert those not into book, but instead I will insert them into a new table called author. And I will execute that query. About to paste 174 rows. That looks good. Go ahead and open up the author table. This now has the author data in it. And I'll take that into design view and again give myself author ID as the primary key. Save changes, yes. And we've successfully applied the primary key to the author ID. Now, there's one more piece of information inside this data that I'm interested in, and that is the connection between the book ID and the author. And so if we come down here and look at Bull Run, again, we'll see that book number, I'll just refer to the last 4 digits, 8149, has 2 authors. It's got David Frampton, who's the illustrator, and Paul Fleischman, who's then the author. And so, 2 people that have credit for creating this book. And so to be able to record that, I need really 3 pieces of information. I need the book ID, I need the author ID, I need the role that that person plays on that particular book. And so I will modify my query and bring in those fields. So back here to query 1, and instead of author ID, we're going to bring in those 3 columns, book ID, author ID, and role. Now I think I'm going to call this table book author. So these are the authors of the book. And so I'll execute that one. So here, design and run. Paste 220 rows into the table. We'll say yes. Here's my book author table. We'll open that one, take a look. I've got a book ID, an author ID, and a role. I'll go ahead and set the primary key on this one. Now in this one, the primary key, I think I'm going to want it to be all 3 of these columns, because it's possible on one book to have a particular author or a particular individual who's filled 2 roles. Could be the author and the illustrator. In fact, there's one book that does have that characteristic, and so I'm going to make all 3 of these the primary key. But I'll make sure I don't have then any duplication, any 2 records that have the same book ID, author ID, and role. I'm not going to say that a particular individual on a particular book filled the same role twice, and so that'll be okay to assert that there are no duplicates there. And we'll save changes to this one. yes. Okay, so now I've brought in the tables and built them to the structure that I want them to have. So now I'm going to do a few things that will just make my life a little bit easier in Access. Let's start off by looking at the book subject table. So this book subject table says a particular book has a particular set of subjects. So again, if we look at the second book here, 1762, it's got these 4 subjects. Now what I want to be careful about is I'm not sure that I want people just entering in the names, the values here, and that's what they can do at this point. They can just type in a new value here. They might spell something wrong, leave the E out of slavery. I don't want them to be able to do that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another table that has just my list of valid subjects. And so I'll come back to my query, and I'm going to select distinct subject. From, now the table I'm after is called book subject. Let's take a look at it. Here's book subject. Subject's the column. So from book subject, and I'm going to insert it into a table that's just, I'll just call it subject. This will be a little bit strange because I'll have a table name with the same name as the column name, if I can type it in there. But that should give me the unique set of subjects. So there's probably not that many different subjects, certainly fewer than we have in the table as a whole. But I'll now go ahead and run that. I've put 161 tables in, 161 subjects, more subjects than I thought. But now I've got a table that's just called subject, and it should just be a list of the different subjects. And so what that's going to be pretty handy, because what that's going to allow me to do is that will now allow me to configure this table to say, listen, don't just let the user type anything they want to here for subject. They've got to pick from the list of subjects, and that list is defined over here in the subject table. So if someone really does want to add a new subject, no problem. They can come and add that subject here in this table, and then that will become a valid choice when they're making changes to our book subject data. So to do that in Access, I'm going to take this table into Design View. I'm going to come to the subject field, my subject column, and I'm going to come down to the properties down at the bottom here, and I'm going to change this to the lookup tab. So we're going to say, hey, how are we going to get the values into this? Instead of just having a text box, which is the default, we're going to say, no, we want a combo box. The row source for this combo box is going to be that new table that I just created, subject. And that should do it for me. Now I'll take this back into table view. You got to save it first. Yeah, that's correct. So now you'll notice that when I select anything here in the subject column, it's not just a matter of typing in, but now I have a drop-down list that I can choose from. Frontier Life. And I probably should make sure that that limits it to this list. That was the whole point. Frontier Life. Let's make one more change here, and there should be a limit to list option here. We'll change this to yes. So now if I come there to Frontier Life and I try to change that and leave the field, it'll say, sorry, not in the list. You've got to choose one from the list. And hit escape, it'll come back. So that'll give me some nice data validation here so that the user can't just type whatever they want to in here. But we're saying this has to be a value from this set of subjects. And so essentially what I've done here is I've implemented a many-to-many relationship between my book table and my subject table. So here's my subjects, saying each subject can be on multiple books. Each book can have multiple subjects, and that's what we're doing in our book subject table. A particular book, here's one book, and it has multiple subjects. If I were to sort this by subject, we would see that a particular subject, and one that's not so long, so here's abolitionists. So the set of abolitionists, these are the 4 different books that we have that have abolitionists as a subject. So one subject, abolitionist, can have 4 different books, potentially more. A particular book can have multiple different subjects. So here's that 1762 book. that's got all 4 of these subjects. So this is a many-to-many relationship really between book and subject, and it's now our book subject table is where we're implementing that relationship. All right, it's a little bit tedious, but I'm going to do that same process for the other my other multi-valued attribute tables, the ones that we split out into separate tables. So I've taken care of subject. I'll go ahead and do genre next. So I'll come back to my query, and I will take a look at genre. The field I'm after is called genre. So I will select distinct genre into genre from book genre. I'll execute that. I'll paste 7 rows. There's not a whole lot of genre there. I'll now look at my genre table, and probably should go ahead and edit this, make that the primary key. Did I do that for my subjects? I don't think I did. Let's take a look. Let's take subject into design view. Oh, it says we're editing it, so we'll let that go for now. Well, we'll go ahead and clean up some of these. So subject, book genre, let's close some of these down. Close down book. Book subject's probably the one that was. Save changes there, yes. Take that into design view. Yeah, make that the primary key. Don't want any duplicates, any duplicate entries there. Subjects have been changed last time you opened it either by another process. We're okay with that. Let's take a look at subject, make sure it looks okay. Yeah, I think that's all right. Design view, got the primary key set, we're okay. All right, so I've now got my genre table built. I'm going to go ahead and modify my book genre table to look at genre on the lookup. Instead of having a text box, we'll make it into a combo box. Row source will be genre. We'll find the table called genre. And I will establish this to limit to list yes. I'll save changes, yes. So now if I look at book genre, again my genre should be now a drop-down list where I can choose between the ones that I'd like to see. So I'll put a genre on this, change it, it's right there. And again, I can't change it to something that's not in the list. Tell me, hey, got to be in the list. Let me go back. All right, same thing for subgenre. So here's book subgenre. Oh, again on the query, select distinct subgenre into a table called subgenre from book subgenre table. Execute that query. 45 rows. Here's my subgenre. Let me go ahead and edit that. Primary key. Now in my book subgenre, I'll take that into design mode, and again my subgenre, instead of it being a text box for the lookup, we'll come down, make that a combo box. Row source will be subgenre, and limit to list will be yes. Again, now subgenre should give me a list to choose from, and it should just be the set of different subgenre there are. Quite a few of them: revenge, romance, saga, whatever. So that's there. All right, so let's move on. Let's look at book, similar book. Book, similar books. So again, if we see a particular book ID here, and then these are the references to the books that are similar to this particular book. Now we'll do the same thing here. I'm going to go ahead and put a lookup, a drop-down list for similar book. So far I haven't put a drop-down on the book ID, which I could have done, and you'll see why later. We're going to be looking at this data from the perspective of a book. So the idea will be we'll pick a particular book, and then we want to be able to see this other data in relation to it. And so we'll go through a process similar on this one. Now we don't have to create another book for another table for our similar books because that's already created. That's our book table. So I don't need to make a new table for this. Instead, I'll just take this one into design view. On the similar books field, I'll come to lookup, change this to a combo box. Now, in this case, this will be a little bit different because we don't just want to see the list of book IDs, we want to see the list of book titles. So our row source is going to be our book table, and our bound column will be 1. So that means we're going to be getting the information from this table, the book table. We want to pull the information from the first column to insert into our similar books field. But the column count that we want to bring back from that isn't 1. We're going to change this to be 2. We want to bring back the first 2 columns. That'll give us back the ID, and it will give us back the title of the book. And now, by default, it's going to show me the first column. It will show me all the columns that I'm showing, but I really want to see the title here. I want to think about this book in terms of its title. So for my column widths here, I'm going to say make that first column 0 inches or 0 pixels or 0 anything units. And then it doesn't matter what I put for the next value as long as it's a non-zero number because it'll take up the rest of the space. So I'll just put 0, 1 here. And limit to list, I will change that to be yes as well. Limit to list will be yes. 0, 1. That should be okay. We'll go ahead and view this, save the table. So now something magical has happened. When I'm looking at a particular book, book 1593, the similar books now I see their titles instead of their numbers. If I come here to Last Exile, I could change this. If it wasn't Last Exile, I say, you know what, it's really more similar to Long Knife. I can select that, and that will put that in, and that will actually place what's actually getting stored in the database is that book ID for Long Knife, but we're displaying it as the title of that book. Really kind of neat. So I'll go back to the Last Exile since that's the real data for that particular one. So instead of showing the value that we're looking up, we can show a different value from that table. So we're looking up this value from the book table. Think about it here. Let me bring that book table up. And let me go ahead and bring the value up for, in the data table, the book table. So here's the book table. And so we've got a book here called The Last Exile. Let me go ahead and find The Last Exile here. Here it is, Last Exile. So what we're saying is that this book right here, whatever 1593 is, Blood River, is similar to The Last Exile. And what I'm seeing here is 1593 is similar to The Last Exile. So I've got that showing here. And again, because we use that drop-down list, we can think of this in terms of the title. We don't have to think about it in terms of the book ID. I want to do something similar to kind of both of these now on our book author table. So let's take a look at the book author table. We want to be able to plug in an author ID, but I don't want to have to think about it in terms of the author ID. I want to see the author's name here. Oh, and we'll want to limit these roles down to just the set of valid roles. So let's begin with that. Back to my query. I'm going to go ahead and select the distinct role into a table called role from book author. And I will execute that query. Oh, there are only 3, kind of a small list. Those are the 3 roles. You can be an author, an editor, or an illustrator. That'll get your name on the book. And so I will come and take this into design view, make that my primary key, and close that table. So now at my book author, I can edit this, and I'm going to change role. Instead of being something I can just type into, again, I think for the last time, I'll come here to role, come to lookup, change that to be a combo box. My row source is going to be that newly created table called role. And I will change it to limit to list, yes. View this and I'll save it. And so now that's a drop-down list that I'm choosing those values from. Now, same thing for author ID. I don't want it to be a drop-down list of author IDs. I want to actually store the author ID, but I want this to be a drop-down list of my author names. So again, into design view on my author ID field, under lookup, I will change this to be combo box. This will be the more complex version. The row source is going to be my set of authors. So I'll go to my author table. Bound column will be 1. The first column in the author table is the author ID, and that's what I have to plug into this field, an author ID, so that's good. Now column count, I'm going to bring back 2 columns because I want to bring back the author ID. Let's take a look at author. I want to bring back the first two columns, so I get the author ID and the full name of the author, because that's what I want to be able to display. So I'm telling it to bring back two columns here, and my column widths, I'll suppress the first column by making it 0 inches wide, and then some non-zero value for the second. Should give me the ability to see all of those. So I'll take this back into design or the table view, datasheet view, and now instead of having author IDs here, I have author names. Now under the hood, Access is going to store the author ID, but it's going to display the author name for the user to be able to see and pick from. The user is going to think of these authors in terms of their names rather than in terms of their author ID. Okay, so we've done a pretty good job to this point of getting us set up to be able to access the data in a little more convenient way, but it's still split across multiple tables. If I want to see the information for a particular book, I've got to look at that particular book. Okay, here it is. Here's the title and the year. If I want to see the authors for that book, well, it's 1593. I've got to come to the author table. I'm sorry, the book author table. Find 1593, and that's the author, Mike Kozer. If I want to know the subjects for that, I'll come to book subject, find 1593. There's only one subject. It's Western fiction. I don't want to have to go table to table to table to be able to see that data. I want to be able to bring this data. It's split apart in the way that Access wants to be able to store this data, but I want to be able to see it all brought back together so I can look at it. Now, this is what I'm about to show you is totally beyond the scope of what we're doing in 201, but I want you to get the feel for what's possible here, so this will make sense. So you'll go, oh yeah, I can see why we would do that. So to do that, I'm going to create a form. I'm going to come to create. Let me go ahead and I'm going to close, before I start creating, I'm going to close the rest of these. Save changes, yes. I guess I'll leave that query where it is, in case I need to create another table. Save changes to this, yes. Okay, so I'm going to open up my book table. So here's the book table, and then in create, I'm going to create a form using the form wizard. And this content from a trustworthy source. Looks like I've got some kind of add-in that's doing that. So we'll say open, that's fine. You probably didn't get that error on your machine. All right, so I'm going to want all of these columns brought over. It's saying, listen, you're building this on the table called book. You're going to bring in the book ID, the title, and the copyright year. That sounds great. I've got different ways that I can organize this form. I'll choose columnar. That's fine. What do you want the title of your form to be? I'll call this book information. And I'll say finish. So now it's given me the ability to look at one book at a time. And if I navigate through, it's showing me just the information for that book. Now, the nice thing about this is I'm really only interested in one book at a time, but this will give me a canvas that I can use to bring in some of that other information. I want to bring in the set of authors to go with this book. So to do that, I'm going to create a different kind of form on my book author table. So my book author table, if I look at the book author table, it's the one that makes the connection between the book ID and then the author and the role that they play. And so I will build a form off of this one. I'll come to my create, more forms. I'm going to make a datasheet form here. So it's made a form now called the book author. It looks almost identical to the book author table because the datasheet form just kind of looks like the way that we normally view a table. But now I'm going to edit this because I don't want to be showing the book ID, because that book ID, ultimately, when I position this form where I want it to be, it's going to be on my book information form. So I'm going to take this into design, this form into design view, and I'm just going to get rid of the book ID column. I'm going to click right over here in the margin, and that'll select everything across at that level. I'll just delete that. Now I'm going to close my book author form. It should prompt me to give it a name. Do you want to save changes? Yes. I'm going to call this the book author subform. Really isn't meant to work by itself because at this point there's no way, if I work this form by itself, to specify the book I'm talking about. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that subform onto this main form. So let's take a look. Take this form into design view, and I am just going to, let's see, I don't quite want that header to be so large. I guess I don't want the underscore there, so we'll just call this book information. Collapse my header down a little bit. And give myself a little more room here. And maybe what I'll do is, whoops, that's in the footer. I don't want that. I want just above the footer. Got some more room on this form. Now let's see. I might organize this a little bit differently. I don't think I need book ID to be quite so wide or quite so tall. So I'll just shrink that down a little bit. And I'll bring this over here. Title, again, I'll just probably put this left to right. Maybe I'll go ahead and leave title a little bit wider. Some of these book titles are kind of wide. I don't need them to be tall, though. Shrink that down a bit. That'll be my title. And then maybe I'll bring the copyright year up here. And again, that's just going to be a year field. I don't need it to be nearly so wide. Let's see, there's some way to align these all to the top. Maybe I have to right-click, choose Align Tops. Try to line up a little bit better. Okay, give myself a little more room here. The book ID, the copyright year. Now I've got the title. It's probably wider than I need for the title. All right, so with a little editing here, let me preview that form. Yeah, it's gotten things put together a little bit closer. Looks like mostly I'm okay in how wide I have those titles. All right, back to design view. And now I'm going to do something magical. I'm going to take my book author subform, and I am just going to drag it, click and drag from over here on the left, and just drop it right here onto the form. And say, great, you've got this form now all figured out. So I don't need this little title here, so I'll delete that. And I'll move this up a little bit. And I probably don't need it to be that wide. Let's just go ahead and, let's see, one more thing I have to do. I've got to tell this subform how to connect up to the main form. So to do that, I'm going to right-click in this upper corner here, right-click that, and choose Properties. And then over here, there should be a way to tell it how to connect up. This is the form. I'm on the wrong form here. Let's see, I gotta have this one selected. All right, select that. Oh, it actually has linked up already. So it says the child and the master fields both going to be book ID. So let's take a look at how this looks. Did that automatically. If it didn't do this automatically, then we could just click this builder. We could choose book ID on the master form. The child form will have a book ID, and that's how they'll connect up together. Take this into view mode. So now what I'm seeing here is that, first of all, it's wider than I need it to be. What I'm seeing here is, on this particular book, Blood River, 1593, the author is Mike Koser, and the role he fills there as author. If I had an illustrator for that, I could pick from my list of folks here, Gary Paulson, and I could say he was the illustrator of this book. As far as I know, Gary Paulson's not much of an illustrator. Maybe he is, though, and we could do that. But the point is that we can now pretty easily assign that information here. Now I can see that this is wider than I need it to be, so I think I'll go ahead and bring that over so that it leans here. Oh, and I'm noticing that I've got these record navigators that I probably really don't need just on this little subform. So I'll do a couple of things. Take this back into design view, and I'm going to shrink this down quite a bit. I can get it selected. And there we go. There we go. Should get the double-headed arrow. From the corner. Double-headed arrow. Kind of picky. There we go. And I'll just bring that down here and that's pretty good. Now, unfortunately, to get rid of that, of those record navigation buttons, I'm gonna have to close my book information form and open up that subform by itself, book author subform. So open it in design view, And it's just an option over here on the form. If I come to all, there should be something called record navigation buttons. By default, that's yes, and for these subforms, I want that to be no. So I'll change that to no, close this, and save it. Then when I reopen my book information form, those record navigation buttons are gone from here. So as we navigate forward, we'll see that it's bringing in all the different ones. I think about record number 23 has multiple authors. Or maybe it's 22. 22 has multiple authors. Here's Paul and David. And so as I'm navigating from book to book, it's showing me who the author is and what role that person plays on it. Looks like 39 is also, we have 2 authors for this one, James Lincoln Collier and Christopher Collier. Okay, so that's what it takes to go across a many-to-many relationship, similar to going across a one-to-many relationship in the many direction. I'm going to bring this subform in. Just to be able to complete this example, I'm going to go ahead and build 3 more subforms and bring them in so that we can see the subject, the genre, and the subgenre as well. So, might be a little bit tedious. You have the ability to fast forward. It won't hurt my feelings if you do. So I'm going to go ahead then and open up my book subject table, and I will create a datasheet form. I'll take this into design view, get rid of the book ID. I will get rid of the navigation buttons, and I will close it. I want to save it. Yes, I'm going to call it book subject subform. Again, I should be able to come back to my book information form, and with that in design view, I should be able to bring my book subject subform onto this form. Again, I don't need this little header here. We'll be able to infer what we're talking about because it'll say subject right here in the subform. And I will then reposition this right below the authors. Maybe I'll just put it right off to the right of the author. I've got a little room here. And see if I can get this to shrink down a little easier than did the last one. I have a hard time grabbing that side handle, but the bottom one seems to be a little bit easier. I think I need very much width for the subject. Go ahead and view that and see what it looks like. Yeah, it looks like I could shave a little more off of this one. I need a little bit more on this one because I can't quite get to the drop-down list there. I don't see the whole thing. So back to design view. I'll make this one just a little bit bigger. I'll make this one just a little bit smaller. Put them right next to each other. That's a little bit better. So now I see the whole, I get the whole button over here. You can see, and again, I can add a new subject to this one. What subject do I want to put? This is an adventure book. I want to add another subject to that. It is an arson book. And as I navigate from book to book, I navigate away and come back to that one, you see that those values then stuck there. They're part of this, now part of this record. So back to design view, and I'll align both of these to the top. If I can align tops. That looks pretty good. All right. I'm also now going to add in my genre and my subgenre. So come to book subgenre, open that one up, create datasheet, go into design view, get rid of the book ID, get rid of the navigation buttons, close it, I want to save it, yes, the book genre subform. Maybe I'll do these 2 at a time. So there's book genre, let's do book subgenre. Create more datasheet. Take this into design view. Get rid of the book ID. Get rid of the record navigators. Record navigation buttons. Close it. And I forgot to rename it. So instead of book subgenre, I want a book subgenre subform. Ooh, one more to go. Let's do our book similar books. Open up that one. Create more forms. Datasheet. into design view, get rid of the book ID, get rid of the record, navigation buttons, close it, yes, book similar book subform. All right, back on my book information form now, I should be able to drag those forms on. So let's bring on my genre. Whoops. Got the wrong one. I want my genre subform. Book genre subform. Don't need that header. Not going to need to be very wide. Grab that little handle on the bottom. There we go. Look over here, the link master fields and child fields. Calculated that correctly, so I don't have to worry about that. And genre subform. Now I want my book subgenre subform. So I'll bring that one in. Resize it. If I could grab it. Sure, I'm having a hard time grabbing that handle. Try the side one. There we go. Bring that up here, and it's already figured out. Book ID is how it links up. Let's take a look at that one. Got those working together. Oh, we've got one with no genre. Well, it seems like all of this has to be historical fiction, so let's at least put historical fiction in. Subgenre looks like it needs to be a little bit wider. So take that back in design view and go wider. All that work to make it, to make it smaller. See if that's wide enough. There we go. So now we've got access to that drop-down list, and here's one with no subgenre. I don't know. Maybe this is coming of age of the subgenre here. So again, we're able to modify this data as we go. I'll add one more block of information in here, and that's going to be my similar books. So back to design view. Let's take a look at our similar book subform. Seems like I've got to grab the upper left-hand corner of that handle. And I'll bring that here. Title can be a little bit longer, so maybe I'll go ahead and leave this a little bit wider. Looks like even a subform could be wider. Oops, I left a little label on there, so let's get rid of that. And I do want my title to be a little bit wider here, so I will set that in the subform. There's a way to edit this directly from here. Subform in new window. That looks pretty wide already. I'm not quite sure how to make this wider. And view the form. Maybe I can make it wider here. Oh, I'll just make it wider here. All right, so that looks like I now have a pretty functional way to look at my book data. I can see this, I've got a lot of similar books here. I think all of these must have at least one similar book. Let's find one that doesn't have many. So here's one with only a couple. You can say, oh, this title, Once on This Land, I know there's another similar book to that one. That is really similar to Early Thunder. And so now I'm able to edit that data. So the nice thing about bringing this information all back together in the form is that we've now got the data stored in a way that the relational database management system Access will be able to handle it very well, and we can now see it all together. and we can add multiple items to this. It's all going to be very queryable. Multiple people can be editing this data at the same time. Well, this is really going to work out pretty well for us. And so that's really where we're headed in the space of relational database management. Again, this idea of using a form to bring all this data back together is beyond what we're doing in IS 201, but I wanted you to have the vision of what this kind of software is able to do. And so we took that data that was stored just in Excel and we brought it here into Access. It took some doing to split this out into all the proper tables, but we're able to bring it back using a form that allows us to see that data and work with it in a really nice way. All right.